Think about this. What if a promise wasn't just something you said, but something your body literally couldn't break? We are used to the idea that promises matter because they're fragile. You could walk away, slam the door, start a war, and the fact that you don't is what gives your word weight. But imagine a culture where peace treaties, marriages, even trade deals are edited straight into your DNA. If you tried to betray someone, your muscles would lock, your hormones would spike, and your own biology would shut you down. Is that the safest future you can think of, or the scariest? No more surprise invasions, no more partners cheating. Also, no way out of a vow that turned out to be wrong. No clean path to say I've changed my mind. So tonight, instead of replaying your day, let your thoughts wander to a pale blue-white world where law lives in bones and blood. Get cozy in whatever way works for you, because we're going to drift beside a human ambassador named Lena Marquez as she arrives there for the first time. She's carrying Earth's messy faith in consent and choice into a civilization that trusts only gene-locked promises. She'll walk through living halls where treaties grow like roots. Meet the Aelari leaders who believe they ended war by editing themselves, and feel that quiet, unsettling question press in. If your body cannot let you do harm, are you still free? That's where her story begins. The Aelari did not sign paper or speak oaths when they made peace. They changed their own DNA. On their pale blue-white world, promises lived in bones and blood. Treaties grew like living roots between families, cities, and stars. No Aelari soldier could lift a weapon once a gene clause said they were at peace. No partner could break a marriage vow written into their germline. Their bodies simply refused. In the late 23rd century, humans arrived with pens, code, and courts. Instead, we carried laws and books and data, not in our cells. We believed a promise meant more if it could be broken, if a person chose, again and again, not to walk away. This story follows Ambassador Lena Marquez, sent from Earth to the Aelari capital world. Her task is simple in words and heavy in practice. Agree to peace and trade that both sides can trust. But the Aelari trust only what their genes enforce. Humans trust only what free minds renew. Between them lies a quiet question that may shape future stars. Can two species build a lasting peace when one writes law into biology and the other defends consent as sacred? Lena will stand inside living halls of crystal bone, beside High Delegate Saurian Tolland, Treaty Engineer Tovin Ulrich, and watch lives saved by promises but cannot break. She will also feel a slow weight in her chest as she asks herself if safety is worth the loss of choice. This is a story about bodies and laws, about ret, forget, forgiveness, and the right to change. It is not about battles or invasions. It is about careful words, steady hands, and two civilizations trying to meet in the middle. Without losing themselves, settle in. We are going to a world where peace lives in DNA. Lena Marquez first saw the Aelari homeworld as a pale coin against deep space. From the window of the shuttle, the planet looked cool and calm, washed in soft blues and faint silver. Thin rings crossed the night side, like quiet brushstrokes of dust and ice. As the shuttle dropped toward orbit, the surface came into view in more detail. Wide forests glowed with gentle light, like seas of fireflies caught in slow motion. The trees were not like the trees of Earth. Their trunks and branches shone with a faint inner radiance, as if made from glass touched by moonlight. Between those forests, long plains of frost-pale grass and shallow lakes reflected the sky. The capital city spread along the coast where glassy cliffs met still water. At first glance, Lena thought she was seeing huge reefs pulled from an ocean and left on land. Buildings rose in branching shapes, like coral that had been guided by careful plans. Walls curved instead of cutting straight. Spires twisted in spirals and loops, and every surface had a soft sheen, like living bone grown smooth over time. Her shuttle slipped into a landing corridor, marked not by lights alone, but by lines of bioluminescent growth along the sides of the passage. The station itself was a grown structure, a vast flower of crystal bone plates opening toward the sky. When the docking clamps took hold with a gentle shudder, Lena felt a small pull in her chest. This was real now. Not training simulations, not screen briefings. A world where law was written into life. Inside the station, the air felt cool and slightly sweet, like rain after a long dry spell. The walls flexed in slow, almost invisible movements, as if the building itself was breathing. Thin lines of color flowed under the surface, tracing paths she did not yet understand. Each was a genetic signal she knew from the reports, carrying regulatory instructions through the living tissue of the station. The human embassy staff met her at the airlock. Their simple metal and fabric uniforms looked strangely dull against the glowing curves of the Aelari station. Behind them waited High Delegate Sarian Tal of the Aelari Commonwealth. Sarian Tal stood taller than Lena by almost a head. The Aelari frame was slim, with long arms and legs that moved with slow precision. Transparent plates of crystal bone covered much of the body, like natural armor grown thin enough to bend. Under those plates, faint inner light pulsed in gentle rhythms. The Aelari face had two eyes, set wide, with pupils like thin vertical lines surrounded by pale color that shifted with mood and focus. Small fronds of flexible crystal grew behind each ear, moving in tiny adjustments to sound and air pressure. Sarianthal bowed with a graceful lowering of the upper body. When the Aelari spoke, the voice was soft but clear, carrying an easy calm. Ambassador Lena Marquez, Sarianthal said, "Welcome to Aelari. Our genetic registries mark this day as the start of a new treaty era." Lena returned the bow with her own practiced motion. "Thank you for receiving me, High Delegate. On behalf of Earth and its coalition, I bring greetings and hopes for peace built on mutual respect." There was a short pause as the translators confirmed precision between languages. Aelari speech carried many small markers for social roles and agreements, and the AI systems needed a moment to align them. "We are pleased," Sarianthal replied. "Our treaty engineers have long awaited human contact. Your species holds to consent with great care. This makes you suitable partners for stable compacts. Lena noted the word stable. It came up often in the documents she had read. To the Aelari, stability was not just good. It was the central value. No surprises, no sudden breaks. History had taught them to fear those. As they walked, the station around them changed from open public space to a more focused diplomatic ring. The floor under their feet was warm, almost body temperature, with a faint give, like walking on firm muscle under skin. Lena tried not to think about that too much. She passed what looked like a tall, branching column of translucent tissue, rising from the floor to the ceiling. Lines of colored light ran up and down inside it, splitting and merging like data streams. Thal paused beside it. "This is a junction for our legal genome," the Aelari said. "The treaties for this station and for the ships docked here are held within. When we say our agreements live in our bodies, it begins here." Lena had learned the theory in training. The Aelari had developed a system where legal codes did not just sit in external storage. They existed as carefully written genetic sequences, held within living tissue structures, held within living tissue. Structures. These were not just symbols. They could, when activated, spread into bodies through controlled exposure, editing germline cells and somatic cells, with specific clauses. "Your law is alive," Lena said, softly, half to herself. Tal tilted the head in a small sign of agreement. "Yes, during our early history, we wrote laws on stone, then crystal memory, then in light patterns. None held. Factions destroyed records that did not serve them. Wars reset agreements. We turned to the material that every citizen carries. No army could burn every genome. Biology became our safest archive." Lena remembered the brief history summary from her files. The Aelari had gone through several cycles of violent conflict, each time trying new ways to enforce treaties. At last, a group of early geneticists proposed something radical: tie agreements directly into the germline. The first versions were clumsy and harsh, but over centuries they refined them into the present system of DNA contracts and gene clauses. As they moved through the station, Lena saw more signs of this living legal world. Street lights were not simple posts, but branching stalks grown from the floor, brightening or dimming based on patterns sent from central genetic regulators. Storage vaults did not have doors alone. They had growth seals that would not open unless specific genetic markers were present nearby. At last, they reached the human embassy. Against the organic curves of the Aelari station, the embassy looked almost like an artifact from an older age. Its walls were flat, matte, and metallic, built-in modules for easy transport and repair. Cables and beams were exposed in some places. It was practical, strong, and not at all alive. Lena stepped inside, feeling the shift from warm living tissue underfoot to the cooler, solid metal floor. Behind her, Thal stayed near the threshold, respectful of human territory. "We propose a primary alliance," Thal said. "That includes exchange of protected roots, shared medical knowledge, and joint response to large-scale crises." Our standard form is a bilateral DNA contract. Our treaty engineers have designed a starting helix that includes both species. The human coalition may adapt it for your biology. With care, Lena turned back slowly. A bilateral DNA contract. She repeated, "You mean a genetic change? In human citizens?" Sarian Thal's eyes shifted color slightly. A small sign of focus. "Yes. Our stable peace depends on genetic enforcement. The contract would affect germline lines registered for interstellar roles. It would include clauses that inhibit hostile acts against registered partners and trigger shared aid responses in crisis. Your records say humans have mastered germline editing. This is familiar practice to you." "It is familiar," Lena said, "but very limited. We use germline editing for disease prevention, not for law. Human treaties sit in data and courts, not in DNA. Any change to our germline for political reasons would be deeply controversial." Sarian Thal seemed to consider this. "Tuo avir Sarian Thal." The fronds behind the ears shifted in a slow flutter. "Our archives show that before the first genetic treaties, we also believed law should stay outside the body. But when external forms failed, we changed. War forced us to accept a deeper integration. The gene clauses ended those cycles. Violence dropped to near zero. Crime that broke core agreements fell away. Stability followed. We did not regret it." Lena felt a small chill despite the mild air. She thought of a system where a person literally could not strike a treaty partner, could not leak secrets, could not choose to break an agreement, because their body chemistry would block the action or shut down the impulse. It was safe. It was also a kind of cage. "With respect, High Delegate," she said, "humans believe consent is not true. Unless it can be withdrawn, a promise that cannot be broken may stop harm, but it may also stop change. Our culture sees value in the ability to say no, even after saying yes before. And our culture," Sarian Thal replied gently, "sees value in removing the capacity for certain forms of harm. We do not design gene clauses for all things, only for bonds that must not break without destroying many lives. Marriage, life-end treaties, core trade and defense pacts. For lighter agreements, we use soft clauses that adapt over time, or cultural contracts closer to yours. There is range." Lena stored that term. Soft clauses, something between full genetic lock and normal law. Maybe a bridge. Sarian Thal continued, "Our proposal is simple. For this first contact treaty, our proposal is simple. We suggest a narrow gene clause that prevents acts of war between our registered vessels and citizens within certain zones. This would anchor our mutual trust." Lena's heart beat a little faster. This was the core of the mission. Laid bare on the first day, she knew her reply was not final. Months of talks lay ahead. But her first reaction would frame the talks. "I am here to hear your best offers," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I also must protect human values that are not negotiable, such as bodily autonomy and free consent. Germline-level contracts fall directly into that space. To many humans, it would feel like control from outside, frozen into our descendants. Sari and Thal bowed the head slightly. Then we will show you our history, our gene gardens, our courts. You will see the harm ended by this path. After that, we will stand again in shared light and test for common ground. We do not wish to erase what makes you human, but we cannot abandon the tools that saved us. Lena nodded. Then let us begin with understanding. As Sari and Thal left, and the living station hummed softly outside the embassy walls, Lena stood alone for a moment in the simple metal hall. The contrast felt sharp. On one side, a species that had written peace into flesh. On the other, a species that had built peace from arguments, votes, and fragile promises. Somewhere between them, her work waited. The next day began with a tour. Tovi and Alrek arrived at the embassy shortly after local dawn. The faint light from the Aelari sun filtered through the station's living walls, turning them a soft blue-white. When the door opened, Lena saw an Aelarian who looked younger than Sari and Thal, with more flexible crystal fronds and less thick bone plating along the limbs. "I am Tovin Alrek," the Aelari said in clear trade speech. "Treaty engineer, second class. High Delegate Sarian Thal asked me to serve as your guide and technical explainer for genetic diplomacy." "Ambassador Lena Marquez," she replied, shaking the offered hand carefully. The Aelari skin between the crystal plates felt smooth and warm, like polished stone that held body heat. As they walked out into the station, Tovin spoke with an easy patience, clearly used to teaching. "Your files show a good understanding of gene editing," Tovin said. "That helps. Our DNA contracts are simple, in concept. A specific sequence is added to the genome, often in non-coding regions that act as regulatory control. Inside that sequence are clauses. Each clause is built from known patterns of gene regulation and sensory integration. It listens for certain conditions. When those are met, it either allows or blocks a set of actions, or shifts hormone systems in ways that change desire or fear." Lena nodded slowly. "So a gene clause is like a legal clause, but built from biochemical switches." "Exactly," Tovin said. Pleased. For example, a basic peace clause may include several parts. First, markers for the presence of another species' biological signature, such as surface proteins or microenvironmental signals. Second, context markers, like being aboard a registered vessel or carrying specific tools. Third, a set of response rules. If all markers align, the clause can restrict muscle activation for attack movements or trigger strong aversion if harm is attempted. They stepped into a wide hall that opened above a glowing forest. The station's outer walls were clear in sections here, showing branches far below that shined like slow rivers of light. In the center of the hall, a series of rounded growths rose from the floor, each like a mound of pale crystal studded with small pods. "This is a gene garden," Tovin said. "This one holds our marriage contracts." Lena walked closer. Inside each pod, she could see slow movement, cells dividing, structures forming. Holographic overlays would have been common in a human lab, but here the information sat inside the living growths themselves. When two Aelari choose marriage, Tovin explained, they design a shared contract with a treaty engineer. Basic clauses are standard: loyalty, mutual aid, protection of any offspring. The contract is written into a small viral vector that integrates into germline lines from both partners. Offspring will carry those clauses unless changed by mutual agreement. Later, Lena watched a pod divide into two smaller buds, tiny sparks of light inside each marked gene insertion events. As described in the briefing, she felt a mix of awe and discomfort. What if feelings change? She asked. What if one partner no longer wishes to stay? Or if the relationship becomes harmful in ways no contract foresaw? Tovin's fronds shifted in a sign of careful attention. Regret still exists, they said. But the gene clauses shape it. In most cases, the contract prevents acts that create deep harm. In the first place, violence is blocked. Severe neglect triggers internal distress that pushes the person to seek help. In rare cases where separation is needed, we use transcription filtering. Lena drew in a slow breath. That was mentioned in our files. What does it look like in practice? Tovin gestured, and a nearby wall plate softened, forming a small opening. From it grew a thin, flat organ, like a leaf of clear tissue filled with faint lights. Transcription filtering, Tovin said, is a control process. When gene contracts are read and expressed, their emotional weight can be adjusted. Strong patterns of destructive regret or obsessive attachment can be reduced, so that citizens can adapt. For a failing marriage, we can reduce the binding strength of certain clauses, allowing separation with less pain while keeping core no harm rules. To a human, Lena said carefully, that sounds like changing feelings by force. Tovin looked at her for a long second. We see it as medical care and social regulation. We treat certain emotional loops like a disease. Our history showed us how unfiltered regret and rage fed cycles of revenge. By filtering, we prevent escalation. Citizens request reviews. There are courts. They moved on. The next stop was a legal complex. Unlike human courts filled with benches and recording systems, this place held long, arching structures that rose from the floor and met overhead, forming living chambers around open spaces. Transparent sacks grew from the walls in neat rows, each with complex swirls of inner light. Our genomic review chambers, Tovin said. Here disputes about contracts are handled. We sample read and, when needed, adjust contracts. No change happens without multi-layer consent from the parties and oversight bodies. The process is recorded in external systems as well. For transparency, Lena felt slightly calmer hearing about oversight, but still uneasy. Your people allow changes to their germline under court order. In specific rare cases, Tovin replied. For example, when a clan abused a trade clause generations ago by twisting its language, our High Court chose to trim that clause from future lines. It had become a tool for slow harm. Genetic diplomacy is not frozen. We refine over time. But the core idea stands. Some promises must be harder than human speech. They left the station later that day for a short orbital hop to a border watch platform. From there, they could see the faint glows of remote routes where Aelari and neighboring species had once fought small clashes before full genetic treaties. Our early space era was bloody, Tovin said quietly as stars drifted past the windows. We built ships as weapons. Routes were taken and retaken. When we finally wrote the first full interstellar DNA contract with a rival nation, the clause included absolute prevention of hostile action between registered vessels. How wide was that clause? Lena asked. Wide, Tovin said. Any act intended to cause large-scale harm between those nations' crews or habitats was blocked. We edited every registered crew, both sides, germline and somatic. At the time, many feared it, but we were tired. The war had gone on for decades. Most accepted the cost. As if on cue, an alert tone sounded, followed by the calm voice of the station systems. Tovin's fronds flared in surprise, then settled. Tovin explained quickly, then frowned as more data came in. No, this is real, but from a very old contract. Lena watched the main display as a small ship icon flickered on the edge of the system map. The translation AI marked it as an unregistered militant craft, part of a radical group that rejected genetic law. It was moving fast toward a civilian Aelari convoy on the far side of the system. The rebels refuse contracts, Tovin said. Tension showing now. They believe our bodies have been claimed by the state. They use unbound crews to try to trigger war conditions again. Will your forces intercept them? Watch, Tovin said. On the map, the militant ship's course did not change. It drew closer to the convoy. Automatic messages went out. No reply came. Then, just as the distance shrank to what human officers would call danger range, several signals lit up along the convoy itself. Old gene clauses, coded in the days of that first interstellar peace. These crews still carry a legacy contract, Tovin said quickly. An extended clause that binds any vessel approaching under certain flags. The rebels did not know that. Sensors showed sudden spikes in the militant crew's vital signs. Actions slowed. Weapon systems failed to arm. Course adjustments went wild, then stalled entirely. The ship drifted, its engines burning at low, aimless thrust. Onboard cameras, shared under treaty rules, showed crew members slumping, hands frozen, halfway to controls, faces filled with confusion and strain. The clause activated through shared environment, Tovin said softly. Microparticles, environmental coupling. It recognized patterns of intent from muscle priming and hormonal surges matched with dangerous approach. It shut down motor plans for attack and triggered strong aversion. Rescue ships moved in from the convoy. Instead of a battle, there was only careful docking and medical help. The militant crew looked angry, shaken, and helpless as they were brought aboard under guard, unable to carry out the attack they had planned. Lena's stomach twisted, so an old gene clause just prevented a war incident, she said, without a shot fired. Yes, Tovin answered. There was pride in the voice, but also something more complex. This is what genetic diplomacy does at its best. The right to attempt mass harm is gone. Lives are saved. They could not choose. Lena said, watching a close-up feed of a rebel pilot trying and failing to move a hand toward a weapon strap. Their bodies locked them out. Would you rather they could choose and succeed? Tavan asked quietly. Those civilians would now be dead. Lena did not answer right away. She thought of human law. Officers blocking attackers with force, ships blasted apart, then courts trying to make sense of the dead. She thought of all the times human systems had failed to prevent the worst. This feels like seeing the future, she said at last, a world where certain acts are simply impossible. For us, it is the present, Tovin replied. We gave up the freedom to perform specific harms. In return, we gained children who do not live in fear of sudden war. Our citizens still make choices. They decide careers, art, love, small disputes, great projects. Only a small set of destructive paths are cut away. Does that not seem a fair trade? Lena kept her eyes on the drifting rebel ship. It seems effective, she admitted. But I was raised to believe that morality matters because a person could have done wrong and did not. If harm is simply not possible, what does goodness mean? Tovin was quiet for a moment. Goodness becomes what is chosen within safe bounds. They said, compassion, creativity, care. We no longer measure virtue by not committing acts our bodies cannot perform. Instead, we measure it by how we use the freedom that remains. Lena could feel the shape of the debate forming in her mind. On one side, a system that saved lives by cutting out the ability to betray certain promises. On the other, a system that treated even dangerous freedom as important. Tovin, she asked, how many wars has your species avoided because gene clauses made them physically impossible? Man traps who bleed. By our models, Tovin said, at least 7 major interstellar conflicts and hundreds of smaller escalations. Our history since full adoption shows almost no large-scale internal violence. We still have disputes, and some crimes below contract thresholds. But nothing like before. Lena let that number sink in. 7 wars that never happened. Hundreds of battles missing from history. She tried to imagine Earth with that record and failed. Now Tovin said gently, you see the heart of our offer. For us, this is not theory. This is survival made stable. You say humans defend consent. But when you bring that value to a table with this record of saved lives, your argument must carry great weight. Are you ready for that? Lena watched the rebel ship being towed safely away, its crew powerless to start the war they had wanted. Her throat felt tight. I do not know yet, she admitted, but I know this. Humans cannot accept gene clauses in our germline as a simple step. To us, that crosses a line. So our task is to find a way to gain as much safety as we can without taking away the right to choose. Tovin's inner light brightened slightly in what Lena had learned was a sign of interest. A new model, they said, something between hard gene binding and soft cultural promises. Yes, Lena said. If we can find it, as the platform drifted in its quiet orbit, with the cool planet turning slowly below Lena, felt the weight of what she had just seen pressing against her thoughts. Peace written in the body had just stopped a small war. Any human watching would feel the pull of that success, but inside, another voice spoke with equal strength. If we give up the right to choose wrong, do we also lose something vital in the right to choose right? That question would follow her back to the Aelari capital, into debates with Sari and Thal, and into long nights in the human embassy, where cold metal walls did not move, and genes stayed for now, as they had been. The human embassy always felt a little too quiet after time in Aelari spaces. Out there, walls shifted and glowed with slow signals, full of life. In here, the metal stayed still. Lights clicked on and off at fixed levels. Air vents hummed with a flat, steady sound. Lena sat in the small conference room the embassy staff called the box. It had no windows, only smooth gray walls and a central table with built-in displays. A pot of coffee steamed beside a tray of simple ration snacks. Across from her sat Elias Chen, the embassy's senior legal advisor. Elias wore a loose shirt rolled at the sleeves and thin glasses he did not actually need. He liked the familiar feel of them, he had once said. On the table between them, 3 screens showed side-by-side charts, human legal codes, Aelari DNA contract structures, and a growing list of conflicts and overlaps. So, Elias said, tapping a pen against the table, "You watched an old gene clause stop a militant attack." "Yes," Lena said. "It shut them down completely. No fight, no dead civilians, just frozen attackers." "And how did that make you feel?" Elias asked. "Torn," she said at once. "Part of me was relieved. Part of me wanted to pull back from the window. It felt like seeing a hand reach into someone else's body and switch off their will." Elias gave a slow nod. "Our law uses jail cells for that," he said. "We lock a body away from certain acts. The Aelari use gene clauses and hormones, different tools, same basic idea. Block harm. But their method bites deeper. It reaches into the place where choice begins." Lena turned her chair a little so she could see all 3 charts at once. On the Aelari side, Tovin had helped them map basic contract types, hard clauses, soft clauses, adaptive clauses governed by courts, and emergency clauses like the one they had just seen. "The thing that bothers me," Lena said, "is the difference between cannot and must not. Human law says you must not steal, must not kill, but you still could. If you do, law responds after. Aelari contracts say you cannot even try if the target is covered by a clause. Your body stops you. So is a promise still meaningful if it is enforced like that?" Elias leaned back, thinking. "We teach our children that doing the right thing matters, even when no one is watching," he said. "That is what gives a promise weight. You could cheat, but you don't. In the Aelari system, the body is always watching. The genome stands in the room like a silent guard. They would say that is what keeps everyone safe." Lena looked at the legal text on her own screen. Typical human treaty language filled it: duties, penalties, arbitration paths. All words that assumed someone could still choose to defect. "I keep circling the same questions," she said. "Is regret a bad glitch to get rid of? Or a sign that the system should change? And if breaking a promise is impossible, does keeping it still show any character at all?" Elias smiled slightly. "Leave it to you to make first contact about moral philosophy." She gave him a tired look. "This is not a joke." "I know," he said, growing serious again. "Listen, our research on Aelari culture suggests they still feel regret, just less of the violent, action-driving kind. Transcription filtering dulls certain loops, but they still look back and wish they had decided differently inside the safe bounds of their system. So they do have room for growth, just not in the direction of war or deep betrayal. Do you think we are wrong to resist?" Lena asked quietly. Elias watched her for a moment before answering. "I think we cannot sell our children's bodies for safety, no matter how many wars that might prevent. That is not something the Coalition will approve. But I also think we cannot stand here on our high ground while their records show centuries without major war. We need to respect that their path worked for them. Our job is not to fix them. Our job is to find a way to connect without losing what makes us human." Lena rubbed her eyes. "Then we need to draw a clean line," she said. "Human bodies stay under human control. No germline contracts, no somatic gene clauses that block core choices. But at the same time, we cannot pretend simple paper treaties will feel safe to them. Or to us," Elias added. "Some of our own neighbors have broken promises before. We know the limits of paper and code." He reached across and tapped a section of the Aelari chart. "Look here. These are their soft clauses. They change over time with regular review. They are not permanent. Citizens must come back and renew them or let them fade. This is closer to our idea of consent." Lena studied the entry. Soft clauses attached to less critical agreements. Trade quotas, research partnerships, temporary shared projects. They still had a genetic base, but could weaken without renewal. So they already accept the idea that some promises should be open to change. She said, "Not every bond has to last forever." "Exactly," Elias said. "And they use cultural contracts too. They are not all genes and no talk. They just anchor their most sacred promises in biology. Like marriage," Lena said, thinking of the gene garden and core defense treaties. "Right," Elias said. They picked the places where, from their view, allowing a break would destroy too much. Now we need to decide which promises we can strengthen without locking them into ourselves. He spun a small projection up from the table. A simple list with 2 columns. Left column, human non-negotiables. Right column, Aelari non-negotiables. Under the human side, he had already written bodily autonomy, germline independence from foreign law, right to withdraw from treaties with due process, right to regret and seek change. Under the Aelari side, stability of core peace agreements, physical impossibility of certain harms, genetic continuity of key contracts, protection from sudden betrayal. We already see the clash. Lena said they want the impossibility of harm. We want the possibility of change. And yet, Elias said, both lists care about protection. They care about not being hurt and about not hurting others without consent. We just disagree on how deep the protection should go. Lena sat back and let her eyes close for a second. She thought of the militant pilot's frozen hand. She thought of Aelari children growing up without fear of war. She thought of human children growing up with the knowledge that, in theory, they could burn it all down. But most of them chose not to. Maybe we should talk to them less like opponents and more like two surgeons, she said slowly. Each thinks a different kind of operation is needed. Both are trying to save the same patient, future peace. Elias nodded, and the patient has a say. Later that day, Lena met Saurian Paul again in a quiet chamber grown just outside the embassy. The room had curved walls that shone with soft inner light. Not bright, not dim. The floor felt warm, underfoot, and a tall, branching structure in the center pulsed with slow color patterns. It was a neutral place shaped by Aelari biology, but used often for talks with outsiders. Ambassador Lena said with a small bow, "You have seen our gene gardens and our courts. You have watched a clause in action. Your eyes hold heavy thoughts." "I have a lot to think about," Lena agreed. She took her seat on a simple human-style chair. Saurian sat on a grown bench that rose gently from the floor. "High Delegate, I understand now what your system prevents. It is hard to argue with saved lives." "Then you accept gene clauses?" Saurian asked. The tone was mild, but the fronds behind the ears stilled. Waiting. "I accept that they worked for you," Lena said. "I do not accept them for us. Human bodies will not hold political contracts. That line is firm." Saurian studied her face. "You fear control from outside," they said. "We feared our own nature. Our wars taught us that some parts of ourselves could not be trusted with free range. So we cut paths out of our possible futures. You will not do this?" "Not at the genetic level," Lena replied. "We already use law to shape behavior. We already punish crimes. Some of our technologies can watch and limit actions, but they are built to be changed by public will and open debate. Genes are not that simple. If we start writing treaties into our germline, we hand control of future bodies to present politics. That feels too close to tyranny, even if done with good intent." Saurian tilted the head. "We are not tyrants," they said calmly. Our system grew slowly. Citizens agreed, across generations, that this was worth the cost. "I do not doubt that," Lena said, "but we do not share your history. We have seen genetic power used in darker ways, forced edits, hidden infections, experiments on people without consent. Even with tight rules, many humans fear any plan that moves law into blood. To sign such a treaty would tear our cultures apart." Saurian fronds moved in a small wave of thought. "Then you will leave?" they asked. Without alliance, that would be a loss. I did not say that, Lena answered. I said we must find another way to build trust. A way that does not require us to give up consent over our own DNA. Sarienthal's inner light flickered, then steadied. Ambassador, if we accept your boundary, what will prevent some future human faction from turning against us? Your words? Your courts? Your data records? We have seen all those fail in other species before genetic diplomacy. They did not hold against hunger, fear, or greed. Lena folded her hands on her knees. Then maybe we need to ask a deeper question, she said. What makes a promise matter to you? Sarienthal considered. Endurance, they said at last, a promise that stays firm across time and mood. Reliability. When my ancestor agreed to a peace, I want my children's children bound by that same foundation, unless our entire culture reaches a new choice through proper process. I want no single angry heart to pull many into ruin. For humans, Lena said, a promise matters when it is chosen freely, with room to change later if circumstances shift in ways no one could foresee. We trust less in a promise that cannot be broken, because we worry it might trap people in harm or hold back needed change. Regret is a fault in our view, Sarienthal said. Our transcription filtering reduces it to small, teachable signals. You say you value it? Yes, Lena said. Regret tells us when something hurts. When a system creates too much pain, regret builds until people push for change. If we cut that feeling away, we risk staying in bad structures too long, just because they are stable. Sarienthal's gaze drifted toward the central branching structure. We once had a contract that was too harsh, they said quietly. An early gene clause that punished clan treachery with permanent social numbness. Those marked by it could not form deep bonds again. The war ended, but the clause stayed. For generations, people lived with a dullness that also blocked joy. They did not revolt, they did not rage. Our society called it peace. Then a small group of thinkers studied their lives and said, "This is wrong." They forced a review. That clause was trimmed. Filtering removed its weight in new lines. We changed. Lena listened carefully. So you did not need full regret for that change, she said. You needed compassion and data. Yes, Sarienthal replied. Your kind would say we used reason. You see, our system is not unable to adjust. It is just slow, very slow, and we accept that slowness. Humans fear slowness when harm is happening, Lena said. We like fast change when things feel wrong. Sometimes too fast. Sometimes we break good things by rushing. But the right to demand change, even loudly, is precious to us. The right to remain safe from sudden chaos is precious to us, Sarienthal, said Bay. Both sat quiet for a few breaths. The room's living walls pulsed with faint, steady light, like a distant heartbeat. High Delegate, Lena said at last, I think we need to name two different kinds of freedom. The freedom to act without limits, and the freedom to live without fear, that others will use that first freedom to harm you. Your gene clauses cut away parts of the first to protect the second. Our laws try to preserve more of the first and use punishment after harm to restore the second. Sarian Tal looked back at her. And you think a balance can exist without biology? I think we have to try, Lena said, because if we do not, our people will never accept closer ties with you. They will always fear a future where their children's choices are set by foreign hands. You call us foreign, Sarian Tal said. We call you unbound. Both are half true. They stood and began to walk slowly around the room, side by side. The floor responded with soft, warm support. Adjusting to their steps, Ambassador, Sarian Tal said, tell me this, if we limit our request, would that help? No human germline edits, no hard clauses, only adaptive reversible contracts that sit in your equivalent of somatic cells. They could be removed if both sides agreed. Lena shook her head. Even that crosses a line for many humans. It would still feel like a foreign system taking hold of our bodies, and any agreement to install it would be made under pressure, since the Aelari would make alliance depend on it. And yet, Sarian Tal said, you ask us to rely on your words and court records, which our history shows can fail. Where is our safety in that? In design, Lena said, in building treaties that do not depend on individual will alone, but also do not touch DNA. We can create systems of automatic support, shared data, joint rapid response teams, and regular renewals. We can design checks that trigger when behavior shifts in dangerous ways, without rewriting genomes. We can build ritual and habit so deep they feel almost physical. Sarian Tal made a soft sound from deep in the chest, which Lena had learned marked interest, not anger. Culture as a kind of soft gene, they said, repeated patterns that shape action. Yes, Lena said, culture can carry strong expectations. People can still break them, but it is hard. They feel pressure from family, law, peers, and stories. It is not as absolute as a gene clause, but it honors consent. You can still say no and accept the cost. We think that ability matters. Sarian Tal stopped walking. Then answer your own earlier question, they said. Is a promise meaningful if it cannot be broken? Lena looked up at the glowing ceiling. I think a promise that cannot be broken is safe, she said slowly, but not moral in the same way. It shows design, not character. It shows that someone with power decided there would be no choice. A promise that can be broken, but is not, shows something about the person who keeps it. It shows care, courage, or at least respect. We want a system where that kind of meaning still exists. And if that meaning costs lives? Sarian Tal asked. The voice stayed calm, but carried real weight. If by keeping this moral idea, you let more wars happen than our system would allow,